It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio. You can find out more about me on the Dan Mandis Show X feed. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me at both at Dan Mandis Show. And Gary and Eric, they'll return coming up after the first of the year. Nancy Pelosi. Somebody sent this to me, a fellow talk show host sent this to me. It's a reminder of what she was saying back in August of 2024. This is so Nancy Pelosi.
It was necessary for me to run again because my goal was to make sure that what's-his-name never stepped foot in the White House again.
I love how she says what's-his-name, by the way. It just shows you how petulant she is. But, you know, one of the things that, and I realize that I may myself sound petulant here, but when Donald Trump won the election, I had an on-air conversation with myself, which I'm sure was fascinating to all, about who I would really love to see the morning after the election, just to see their reactions. You know, I'm thinking about Taylor Swift. I'm thinking about Oprah Winfrey. I was thinking about someone like Nancy Pelosi.
And that was part of my mission for the children. I went from housewife to House member to House Speaker for the children. Right. 1 in 5 in poverty, living in America and going to sleep hungry at night. They were my mission.
Have another drink.
The Congress, they were my priority. Their health, their education, the economic security of their families, safe environments, including safe from gun violence in which they could thrive, a world at peace in which they could reach their fulfillment, and our country could too, with them. So that was my mission. The difference between the visions of the Democrats for the people addressing their kitchen table issues and the other side is so vast that I'll have to put out my enjoyment of other things for a while until we get that job done.
Right. So the BS meter is way off the charts. And, you know, she's speaking sort of in a rapid fire. So I wanted to kind of slow this down a little bit and handle these things one by one. First of all, again, I love how she calls Donald Trump.
What's his name?
She calls Donald Trump.
What's his name?
All right. So either, you know, perhaps she's been hanging out with Joe Biden too long. The dementia is really setting in at 84 years old. Or
what's his name?
She's just being a child. Petulant. Because she won't even. But you know what? What do you expect from a woman who tore up the State of the Union? So there was that aspect of her little speech from this interview on CNN back in August of 2024. She also talked about the children.
I went from housewife to House member to House Speaker for the children.
For the children, don't you know? It seems like an odd flex to talk about the children when your party's entire campaign was based on killing children. Kamala Harris's entire campaign, literally the only thing that they could offer was abortion and aborting children. And somehow they got some joy out of wanting to abort as many children as possible. So when she said,
I went from housewife to House member to House Speaker for the children.
It just, to me, again, the BS meter right off the charts. And then she goes on.
1 in 5 in poverty, living in America and going to sleep hungry at night. They were my mission. In the Congress, they were my priority. Okay. Their health, their education, the economic security of their families.
Wow. Okay, you threw a lot out there. So their education. Then why, I would ask Nancy Pelosi this, then why do you kiss the ring of the unions? If you're so concerned about their education, Why are you kissing the ring of the unions? I don't believe that you, Nancy Pelosi, care about the kids. If you did, you would allow school choice. So don't sit here and tell me how much you care about education, because you don't. You don't. You also mentioned, you talked about their economic security. Really? Really? Because it was your president and your party, Nancy Pelosi, that gave us 9.3% inflation. It was your party and your party's spending that sent prices skyrocketing. So please tell me more about how you, and by the way, I love the whole tenor of this conversation where she's like, oh, you know, I decided to grace America and Congress with another 2-year term because I couldn't allow what's-his-name back into the White House. Please. She went on.
Including safe from gun violence, in which they could thrive, a world at peace in which they could reach their fulfillment, and our country could too.
Wow. Okay, so she talks about gun violence, you know, trying to protect the children that they're trying to abort. So, gun violence. You know what I would say to that? Number one, I mean, clearly it's not the gun, it's the person behind the gun, but putting all that aside, you do nothing to stop violence. I would say to Nancy Pelosi, because if you really wanted to stop gun violence, and I'm air quoting that, if you really wanted to stop gun violence, then you would put people in jail. You wouldn't allow these George Soros DAs to have these soft on crime policies so that these dirtbags would commit crimes and destroy cities. Because when you want to protect the children, what you actually want to do is put bad guys in jail. That's what you want to do. Oh, and I don't know, not open up the borders to a flood of illegal aliens, including Tren de Aragua and MS-13. You know what I mean? It's just, it was like the talking points, they just write themselves. And I love the part where she talked about world peace. I don't know, did you catch that? I know I'm throwing a lot at you, friends.
A world at peace in which they could reach their fulfillment, and our country could too.
A world at peace. Really? Would you like to talk about the failed pullout of Afghanistan? Would you like to talk about Ukraine and Russia and how Joe Biden's weak sanctions and the threats against sanctions, threats of sanctions against Russia were so weak that they felt emboldened to go after Ukraine? Let me talk about that. Because Joe Biden emboldened Russia to go into Ukraine in a couple of different ways. Number one, of course, the failed pullout of Afghanistan. And number two, when Biden was threatening sanctions and implementing sanctions against Russia, they were weak. And Vladimir Putin is like, I don't know how you say whatever in like Russian, but that's what Vladimir Putin said. And then, of course, we also know that Joe Biden, as Nancy Pelosi back in August of 2024, she was talking about how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party are all about world peace. Really? Because when Joe Biden was took over, I wasn't going to say elected, but when Joe Biden came into office, you know, part of what he did was he looked at those sanctions that Donald Trump had put on Iran, and he basically ignored the sanctions, basically allowing Iran to sell billions of dollars worth of oil, which meant that they had that money selling, by the way, to China. So then they had all this money so that they could start funding terrorism. Fast forward a couple of years, you have Hamas going into Israel and killing 1,200 Israelis. Trained by Iran and paid for by Iran. So I find it awfully rich that Nancy Pelosi is talking about
peace in which they could reach their fulfillment, and our country could too.
Peace, world peace. It's just incredible. I heard that, and it's like, oh my gosh. Let me count the ways in which my BS meter is going way up. And so I love how she's sitting there and she's saying, oh, I'm putting aside all the things, all the wonderful things that I want to do in retirement so that I can keep what's his name out of office.
So that was my mission. The difference between the visions of the Democrats for the people addressing their kitchen table issues and the other side is so vast that I'll have to put out my enjoyment of other things for a while until we get that job done.
There you go, Nancy Pelosi, everybody. Oh, man. That's what I mean. I think at my local show in Nashville, I think if I remember right, I was really tired the next day after the election. But I was there, and we're talking about basically who you would love to be a fly on the wall in the kitchens of. Because this was a middle finger to, from America to the ladies on The View, Oprah, Taylor Swift, all these people that were calling Trump supporters Nazis. And the rest of that nonsense. And America just said, you know what? We're not buying this crap anymore. Clearly, we didn't buy that crap anymore. And one of mine was Nancy Pelosi. I number one, I wanted to see how much she was drinking. And number two, I wanted to see how she was handling the absolutely devastating loss for the Democrats at the hands of Donald Trump. And again, one of the big news stories out there today, I don't even think I've really covered it much, but you do have the Democrats, and they're having a lot of issues recovering from what happened in November. And I think it's really funny. This is Jennings. This is Scott Jennings. I'm looking for the audio. It was a great piece of audio. Scott Jennings was talking about how bad the Democrats are, and he was talking about how they've got a lot of people within the Democrat Party, and their problem, their big issue, is that they're progressive as the day is long, to the point where the American people look at them and they think that these folks on the left are nuts.
Democrats are the party of uncommon nonsense. Republicans are the party of common sense. It's why our tent right now is full of such a wide ideological spectrum. People are flocking to the Republicans because we stand for common sense. Yeah. And Democrats have taken on all this uncommon fringe nonsense. And if they are in the toilet, my advice, flush away the fringe and the people who have drug you down there, because this is why Republicans won the election.
I mean, he's absolutely right. And what I said earlier is absolutely, you know what, Democrats, just keep going down this road. And we'll see how it works out for them in the midterms and also the next presidential. David is in upstate New York. David, thanks for calling Red Eye Radio. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I think you're doing a good job when Gary and Eric aren't here. You really killed me with that Nancy Pelosi, because now I want to change subjects, but I'm going to stick to the original subject for which I called. My problem, I've been married to my wife now 30 years. 23 of those 30 years, my wife has been an educator in the state for which we reside right now. The amount of children that she is told to push through the system is astonishing. We are graduating children that cannot read, that cannot write, that cannot do basic arithmetic. They can't count down change at a cash register. We send them to college. They graduate from college and they don't have any form of common sense to them. I'll point out a basic situation. If you're going in for brain surgery and you have a choice of an American doctor who graduated 100th of the class, or you have a choice of an Indian doctor that graduated first of his class, and you're going in for brain surgery, both of them graduated, both of them have their medical degrees, both of them are doctors. But do you want the number one doctor or the number 100th doctor. And if I'm an employer and I'm getting the number one student in that class for $50,000 less than I'm getting the number 100 student in that class, it would almost be an ignorant move for me to hire the 100 student over the number one student.
But I think, and David, that's a fair point. But what I would say is that what people are angry about with the H-1B visa story is that there are so many Americans that were fired, even though they were doing a good job. They were fired simply because they could abuse the H-1B visa system. So that's number one. And number two, while it's a fair and valid point that you make, that doesn't account for all of the people that are out there that are looking for work and did well in college, but simply can't get a call back because of all the H-1B visas that have been issued. So there's a lot of, and I've been saying this all night, and I apologize, but it is a nuanced conversation because, yes, you're right, many things can be true. We can have a really poor educational system, especially in places like New York, but at the same time, we can have really smart kids who went through STEM in high school and college, and they simply can't find work because it is a lot cheaper to go through the H-1B visa program and find somebody from India. But I appreciate the call very much, and I appreciate you holding on. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. We'll return next.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Among the top 10 weather stories for 2024, in no particular order, per USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey, 2 early season hurricanes.
Beryl. It was at one time the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record in the Atlantic Basin. Made a close pass on Jamaica, moved across the Yucatan Peninsula, and weakened to a tropical storm. But before it hit the middle Texas coast on July 8th, it started to regain some intensity, and it was a Category 1 hurricane when it moved ashore,
causing significant damages in Houston and East Texas, and a tornadic outbreak, a final damage tally of $7 billion. 1 month later, Debbie hit Florida's Big Bend.
eventually moved offshore and then came back in as a tropical storm across South Carolina. There was some agricultural damage across the lower southeast, including parts of Florida and Georgia into the Carolinas, some flooding.
Responsible for an estimated $2.5 billion in damages. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. So Fox News has an article on the 2028 front runners for the presidential run for the Republicans. And I'm sure that you know who's number one, right? J.D. Vance, right? I think it's clear that J.D. Vance is going to be the guy, but you've also got Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who I like Ron DeSantis a lot. I do like J.D. Vance better. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Some people would call him a rhino. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. I really like Glenn Youngkin. Ted Cruz of Texas. I'm going to say this about Ted Cruz and his aspirations to be a president. He's a really good senator. That's all I'll say about Ted Cruz. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, like him. Josh Hawley of Missouri. Nikki Haley, no. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I'm a big fan of hers as well. And they say Vivek Ramaswamy as well.
Unlimited access.
Red Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. By the way, just real quick, we were talking earlier about how Donald Trump is trolling Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, by saying that Canada needs to become our 51st state. And shocking that there's people in Canada that are like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Well, the battle over the Panama Canal does continue as well. President Trump, of course, continues, and over the past several days, a lot of people talking about how Trump's Christmas wish list, Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. And so remember what the former president said about the Panama Canal.
It's a terrible thing is happening. The Panama Canal is considered a vital national asset for the United States of America due to its critical role, American economy, the whole world economy, and also national security. The Panama Canal. Has anyone ever heard of the Panama Canal? Huh?
We have now.
Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else.
So this is obviously a very big deal, and I covered this extensively when it was going on in the news a little bit more than it is now, but it's still in the news big time. So just a quick retrace. Back in 1977, Jimmy Carter gave the Panama Canal to Panama, even though we designed it, we built it, we paid for it, and Americans died building it. Carter decided in yet another great Democrat decision that'll live in infamy. It was built to connect the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. We have a massive amount of boats that sail through it, ships, and it's critical for our trade routes. 70% of the ships that sail through the Panama Canal are leaving or going to U.S. ports. And so for the president-elect, he's talking about this, and he's talking about it a lot. Now, remember that Donald Trump has been blasting Panama because he says that they're letting China manage it, and this has been a big part of the conversation over the last couple of days.
It was solely for Panama to manage and not for China or any other country to manage. You see what's going on there? China.
And so Trump's big worry, of course, is that China will have undue influence over the Panama Canal, specifically its operations. They have actually invested a lot of money. So bottom line is, with China, there's that Belt and Road Initiative. And what that is, and I explained this a few days ago, but what that is China basically, they've got massive construction companies in China. And so what they do is they're utilizing these companies, and they're brokering deals with foreign governments. And so in those deals, they've got these massive construction projects, and they're building infrastructure for these other nations. And so what that does ultimately is that means that China gets their tentacles all over the world through the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a very big deal. And so what happens is they build relationships, and they also build influence through all of these various construction projects, among other things. And so there's worries that China, because of these construction projects, specifically around the Panama Canal, as it needs to be upgraded, and it needs to be not only upgraded, but also expanded and so forth. Well, that is happening with the help of these Chinese construction companies. And so a while back, China, I should say the Panama Canal, decided that they would recognize China and not recognize Taiwan. And so for America, that was a very big deal. Also, part of the dynamic here, there's a lot of worries that China could also monitor our naval and commercial ships as well. And they own ports on both sides of the Panama Canal. And so everywhere you look, as it relates to the Panama Canal, we are losing influence, and China's gaining influence. And so you'll hear a lot about this concept of neutrality. It's going to keep coming up. the canal basically is supposed to be neutral. All countries are supposed to be able to access the canal. No favoritism. It's all supposed to be neutral. But with all of this Chinese involvement, from the owning or the controlling of the ports, the construction projects, the upgrading, the expanding of the Panama Canal, utilizing these Chinese construction companies, Trump and a lot of other people are worried about the canal's neutrality. And so this is a very big deal, because America is supposed to be, as you folks know, America is supposed to be the top dog. But the problem is that China is doing so well with the Belt and Road Initiative. America has been trying to catch up to China, but we just haven't got there yet.
Well, I tell you what is very serious, and that is pushing back on the encroachment of Chinese influence in the Western Hemisphere. Yes, I do.
You think this does that?
I think Donald Trump is trying to send a message to the Chinese, and he's also trying to send a message to everyone else in the hemisphere that I'm not going to put up with this encroachment. Now, what is true is that China is having encroachment in this hemisphere, in Africa, all over the world. They are trying to act like the world's leading superpower. They are trying to exert their values and their way of life all over the world.
I mean, Scott Jennings is right. That Belt and Road Initiative is having a major impact on America's influence across the world, because China's doing what we should be doing, but we can't seem to catch up to China. And they've been clearly, obviously, trying to replace America as the top dog. And that is what everyone is worried about. And by the way, again, we've tried to answer their Belt and Road Initiative with our own version, but it's still in development. Hasn't really taken off like we needed to. And so China, they still have the dominant infrastructure, construction companies across the world. And Scott Jennings is right. Donald Trump needs to do whatever he can to keep China at bay. That is critically important.
And I think what Donald Trump is saying here is, I don't want this in my backyard. America is the world's superpower. More America is better. And I'm sending a message that I'm not going to put up with this sort of creeping Chinese influence in my own backyard.
Help me with this thinking though, really quick. And Karen, I'll bring you in a second. But if it angers Panama, if it hurts relations with Panama, the calculation is it won't, and it doesn't matter.
Do I care if Panama is angry? I mean, honestly, I need them to understand, and Donald Trump needs them to understand, that we are the dominant superpower in this hemisphere, and he needs to have a conversation with them about that, and I hope that he does. And yes, they are an ally, but this is a vital thing, this Panama Canal, but I'm just telling you, the encroachment of Chinese influence around the world must be stopped, and if Donald Trump's getting serious about that, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Jennings is right. There's a reason why we play his comments a lot in talk radio, and it's because, number one, he's on CNN, and he is the lone voice of reason on CNN. And number two, dude just flat out makes a lot of sense. And Panama, by the way, number one, they're saying, listen, you may think that you can take over the Panama Canal, but you really can't. And let's all be honest. This, like Donald Trump saying that Canada is going to become our 51st state, same deal here. It's all in the art of negotiation. Panama is saying no. They have relationships with China, just like they have relationships with America. But China has helped to expand the canal. So Trump made headlines by saying that he wants the canal back. I want you to remember this comment from Donald Trump.
You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it. So to the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly.
Well, Panama and their president says, nope. Basically, the Panama Canal, they say, is not for takeover. It is not for sale. Panama's President Jose Raul Molino says that Panama's sovereignty is at stake. Now, I said this the other night. I will also continue to say that part of this is Trump negotiating. He wants to lower the prices that we've been paying to go through the canal. Tim Burchett is one of my favorites. He is a congressman out of the fine state of Tennessee.
I think it's classic Donald Trump. I think he's negotiating. You don't negotiate from weakness. The Democrats are wringing their hands. They run around the globe and apologize for America, and there's no reason to apologize. The communist Chinese own the ingress and egress of that port, and they're expecting us to pay into it, and that just isn't going to happen anymore under this game. Trump is the biggest dog in the pound, and they know it, and the Democrats can't do anything about it.
Well, you know, the funny thing is you do have Democrats in the media in Panama saying, heck no, this is never going to happen. Trump is simply looking for neutrality, cheaper rates, and to keep China at bay. That's the biggest thing. Because the more influence China has, the Panama Canal, the more that neutrality is threatened. And Congressman Tim Burchett, he knows that.
We have got to be able to access this port, and there is no better negotiator than Trump at this point, because if he understands it, he gets it. And when he says he's going to take it over, you know, they can sit there and say, oh, he won't do that. He won't do it. It's just bravado. But, you know, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, this guy Trump, he might just pull this off. He's a cowboy. He might just do it. They ought to go ask Soleimani, the terrorist, what he thinks of him, because all they found of him was his ring finger.
And that is why we love Tim Burchett here in the state of Tennessee. Eddie's in Maryland on Red Eye Radio. Eddie, thanks for holding on. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, good morning, Dad. I just want to firstly thank you for the outstanding job that you're doing in terms of, you know, making the exposure related to this H-1 visa issue. And I just wanted to comment. I've been a corporate director for 20-odd years in a Fortune 500 company. And I got to tell you, one of the reasons I voted for Trump is because of his American First agenda. Mm-hmm. That means that we should hire Americans first based on their talents. And I was told to go hire Indian engineers over very well-educated, top-ranked American engineers. And quite frankly, because my dad was in Vietnam and my granddad was in World War II, I really pride myself in helping Americans. And I think that the critical path and some of the things that Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump, is initiating, I think is important. I think that we need to invest more training into Kansas, West Virginia areas, including the city environments, right? Because we have engineers there that are very talented. We have Einsteins in those environments that their talents are never given an opportunity. Yeah. That's another thing I think we need to focus on. And I think related to the earlier caller, emotional about this topic, I think it is based on money. It's based on corporate incentives. I was given a mandate to go hire folks from India, from the University of Microsoft, because the corporate folks in the company were getting kickbacks. I think that that's one of the reasons I voted for Trump, was because he's an American First president and because he believes in American talent. I refuse to believe that foreign talent is smarter than Americans. I think that we also need to look at the fact that a lot of these individuals from other countries, they send their monies back home. So then their monies are not utilized within our economy. That makes us weaker, too, as a country. And I think that, obviously, I'm sure you can tell that I'm an African-American engineer, retired engineer, project director. And I got to tell you, this is the best country in the world. I've been to Africa. I've been to Europe. And I think that we all have to partner with each other to try to help our country get better and stronger. And I think it starts with that. It starts with investing in American talent and understanding that we are not inferior to anyone on the planet. Make no mistake about that, Dan.
Boy, Eddie, I would love to have a comment after that, but that was a slam dunk, and I mean, you said it very succinctly. Eddie, real quickly, I've only got like 30 seconds, but how much money can you say, or would you say, that the company was saving by going and trying to hire people from other countries as opposed to Americans?
I think that, I think it's billions of dollars that we're trying to save. But I also think that if there was some of that money's invested in a place like West Virginia, right, or Kansas, in a rural area where we said, hey, we're going to hire cybersecurity engineers and we're going to actually train them so they understand engineering technology, because the folks in these inner cities as well as in these rural areas, they're smart individuals. They just need training, and they need discipline, training, and they need some exposure.
Eddie Lovett, thank you very much for the call. Dan Mandis here. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio 690 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.